Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. Well, today we're going to talk about moons, and you certainly can't create Halloween cards without being able to create some stunning moons. And there's a lot of approaches out there, but I wanted to show you a couple of examples today on how I create some of my moons and give you some ideas for your Halloween moons. Now we're going to go into two different types of moons. This moon is a little bit more textured, and I used some textured paste where I got the crackle effect. And then on this one, it's a little bit smoother and a little bit more vibrant, and this is where I use the Embossing Glaze. Now I'm also going to show you how I created my background. Now whenever I approach nights, there's three color combinations that I typically will work with. I'm working with some sort of a blue, some sort of a purple, and some sort of a red. Now, not necessarily a real red, more of a maroon, but those are typically the combinations that I will use. And then once I have everything finished, I will typically come in with some sort of a black. Typically black soot is what I'll do for my edges, just to kind of tie it in. Now, another thing that I do when I'm creating backgrounds is I start with a bigger surface. And what I mean by that is if I'm making an A2 card, then I'm going to start off with a card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, knowing I'm going to trim it down. But I just find that it's better to create a bigger background and then trim it down. Okay, so when I'm working with texture paste, I usually like to create my own templates, and I like to do it out of some sort of thicker piece of cardboard or paper. Not too thick, because if you are using your die, you have to make sure that you're able to die cut it. And then also if you're going smaller and you're using a punch, you want to make sure that you can punch it out. So thick enough where it's going to be able to hold your medium, but not too thick that you're not able to get your dies through. So let's go ahead and work with the Distress Texture Paste first. Now, if you've never worked with Distress Texture Paste, it's kind of like icing. So if you've iced a cake before, that's the texture that you're going to see. And this medium will dry up on you if you don't use it. So if you are going to invest in some of your texture paste, you want to make sure that you do use them, because they will dry up on you just like a lot of other mediums out there. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to work on is the moon that has the textured paste. And whenever I'm working with texture paste, typically I'll create the background first before I actually do the moon. And to create the background, I like to use, what do I like to use? I like to use something that's going to cover my moon area. Now you could probably create the background not using this, but I like to have a white space when I'm working on my moon. On this particular one, you can see some of the purple through there, which is fine. You don't necessarily have to do that, but this is a nice way to create a glow. But for this purpose, I'm going to go ahead and not do that, because I want to be able to focus on the background. So when I'm creating the background, I like to have 3 designated blenders, so that way I can easily change them when I'm blending. And let's see, I've got purple, I've got red, and then I need blue. Let's see if I can find the blue here. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and start with the purple, which is the lighter, and then I'm going to go into the blue. Okay, so I went ahead and I sped up the video for purposes of my blending, and I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of walk you through what I'm doing here. So when I'm making a background, especially a night background, I don't worry about my blending being too smooth. And what I mean by that, I don't mind some of the harsh edges that you're going to see here. And that's because I like the background to look a little imperfect, especially for a night. I like the imperfections because it kind of brings out a little bit of texture. And in my opinion, I think it makes it look a little bit more real. And then as you can see, there is a distinct line as far as the horizon. But what I end up doing to kind of blend that in is once I get that darker color, then I'll come back with the lighter color and I'll go over it. So that way it's going to pull some of that darker color into the lighter color. And again, you're going to be able to see the colors kind of blend through the darker background. And I go back and forth between my colors. So even though I started out with the one color, as you saw, I went back and forth. And that's why I think it's important to have 3 separate blending tools, because you're going to be going back and forth quite a bit. And then on my nights, I like to come in with my black soot just on the edges, and then I'll pull some of that color in with some of the other colors. And I think it just kind of ties it together. The black kind of works as shadows, so that's why I tend to use my black soot. Now, this process here where I had all of my ink on my mat, you can do this or you can skip it. I wasn't necessarily pleased overall with the results, but I ended up reblending it. But I didn't want to go ahead and see how it would look if I pulled up some of that color on my media mat. So I went ahead and I spritzed it and I pulled up some of that water. But it was just a little bit too much water, and I found I didn't necessarily like the way that it looked. But if you don't like that, or if you just end up plain and you think you have too many splotches, then what you can do is you can dry it off and then come back in with your colors. And at the end, I ended up liking it because it did kind of look like it was shadows and parts of the sky just kind of peeking in through the darkness. And then once my ink was completely dry, then I went ahead and I used my stencil, which is my circle, to create my moon. Now for the moon, remember, we are going to be using that crackle paste, but you don't necessarily have to use the crackle paste. I liked it because it made the moon have the crackle, of course, the creaks, and the lines through it. But you could easily use just regular texture paste as well, because it is going to dry somewhat hard, and you'll still be able to use your distress crayons to be able to get that color as well as keep that texture. So again, this is a stencil that I created just using one of my circle dies. So if you didn't feel like you wanted your moon to be this big, you can use a smaller die. So it's completely up to you. The process is still the same. But on my Halloween cards, I like a big vibrant moon because it kind of sets the tone for my card, and then I'm able to put my little characters in front of it. And ordinarily when I am creating something like this, you're going to have to fussy cut, because when you're using texture paste, certainly you're not going to be able to stamp over it. Now, as I alluded to in the beginning, I do start out with an oversized card and then I trim it down. And this is so I have a bigger space to work with when I'm blending. And that way, if you like any part of the card particularly better than other parts, you can trim it down to what you like best. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and come in with my stencil now, and this is the stencil that I created using my circle dies. And if you didn't want your moon to be this big, certainly you can use a smaller die. The set that I have has several sizes of circles, and I just chose to use the one that was not the largest, but I believe it was the second to the largest. And then in order to add your texture paste, I'm just using a plastic palette knife, and then I'm coming in with this tool that I got from scrapbook.com. If you've ever used plaster on your walls, that's kind of the motion that you're using here. So you're just adding your texture paste, and then you're getting your flat surface and rubbing it through to get full coverage. And on this moon, if you wanted some of that purple to show through, you can get some streaks depending on how smooth you're able to get your texture paste. But if you don't want to have any of that moon showing through, you're going to want to just use a thicker amount of your paste. Now, if you don't have crackle paste, you can do this technique with other types of texture paste as well. I just chose to use the crackle paste because I wanted those cracks to come through the moon. And ultimately, I'll show you here when I start adding my color. And once you have the desired coverage, then you're going to want to pick up your stencil very easily. You want to make sure that you aren't going to smear it or pull it. Just pull it straight up so that way you can keep the integrity of the circle. And this texture paste is going to take a minute to dry. So you can either put it aside or you can use your heating tool. Now, you may have some extra texture paste on your stencil as well as on your scraping tool. So you're going to definitely want to pull that off and put it back into your container to use it for another day. Now, because I am going to go ahead and demonstrate a second type of moon, we're going to go ahead and put the texture paste aside, and then we're going to come back and we're going to work on the color once it's dry. All right, so for the second moon, we're going to be using our embossing glaze, and this is the distress glaze from Tim Holtz, and the color that we're going to be using to do our moon is Fossilized Amber. Now, because you don't have the thickness of the texture paste with the embossing glaze, I did choose to mask over my moon to do my background. And then again, the background, I just brought in my color to go ahead and color up my background, but it's not going to take me as long because I'm going to have a big part of that card that's going to stay white because of my masking. Okay, so I did trim out part of the video where I did the blending for the second background because I had already showed you how I did that. And I really wanted to get into the technique for creating the moon. So once I had all of my coverage exactly the way that I wanted it, I went ahead and I peeled off that moon. And you know, if you've done any masking before, underneath that masking tape is going to be a very vibrant circle. And this is probably my favorite part of masking, is just pulling off what you've actually covered up, because boy, you forget how white that paper is, right? So now that I have my moon, we can go ahead and we can add some of that embossing ink to finish off our moon. Now, when I'm adding my embossing ink, I want to make sure that I'm going to stay within the colors. So when you die cut your circle, you're going to have negative space, and that's what I'm going to use to mask over my background. So that way the only thing that I'm going to have revealed is my moon. Now, if you want to trim some of this paper before you actually add it, you can definitely do that, and I probably would recommend it, because you're going to see when I go to pull it off, some of the sticker part does stick to my background. I don't actually tear my background, but it does stick, and that's because when I used the heating tool, it kind of set that sticker portion to my background a little bit more than I would have wanted it to. So just be aware of that. The main part you want to make sure that you have covered is, of course, around the circle. So you don't necessarily need that extra sticker that I have on the top and the bottom. So trimming it down before you actually go into this process is recommended. And then I'm generously adding my distress ink, my embossing ink here to my circle. Now, if you've ever used embossing ink before, it does come out clear, so sometimes you might think that it's not coming out, and that's where you see me kind of pushing it down, and there's a nib right in the middle that if you push it down, it does help release some of that embossing ink. But rest assured, if you are pushing it down and rubbing it around, it is coming out. It's just clear. But you want to make sure you have good coverage, especially when you're creating a moon, because you don't want to necessarily come in after the fact. You want to get good coverage the first time. But don't fret. Even if you don't get good coverage, you can always come in with some distressing crayons or distressing ink as well. All right, so now that we have our circle completely covered with the distressing ink, we're going to go ahead and add our embossing glaze. And again, the glaze color that we're using here is Fossilized Amber, and I found this one to be the best one for the moon. It's not a bright yellow, but it is yellow enough to look like a moon once you have it completely dried. So go ahead and just tap off the excess as I'm doing here, trying to get it back into your little container, and then whatever excess you have on your work area, you can go ahead and scrape it up and add it back into your container. And then once you have your work area cleaned up, then you're going to go ahead and pull out your heating tool, where you're going to go ahead and heat the circle completely. Now, remember, if you've used embossing powder before, this is just really fine granular plastic, so when it melts, it is going to be hot. And because you have a big surface here where you're adding your embossing glaze, you want to be really careful. So don't touch it immediately after you finish drying it. Give it a minute to cool, because it is hot plastic and you will burn yourself. So just be mindful of that. Make sure it's nice and cool before you actually touch it. So you're just taking your heating tool and you're going to completely dry it, and you're going to be able to see when it is dry, because it turns from like a sand to a shiny plastic, and you'll be able to see that as you dry your moon. And then while I'm going to give my embossing glaze a minute to dry, I'm going to go ahead and set it down, and then I'm going to pick up my other background where I used my texture paste, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a good dry as well. I did leave it aside to dry, but I just want to make sure before I start adding my color that it is completely dry. And remember, we used crackle paste, so as you start to dry it, it will bubble a little bit and you'll be able to see the cracks starting to come through. Now, I don't know if you can see it on camera here. I can, so you probably can too, but you can see that purple coming through that white, and I think it looks really cool. Your moon, when you're looking up, isn't necessarily all one color, right? It has all of those crevices, and it has some dark spaces, so that purple coming through actually makes it look a little bit more realistic, at least in my opinion. I think it does. So I wasn't overly concerned that I didn't mask it, because I like the color coming through the texture paste. And once it's completely dry, then we're going to be able to add some color to that moon as well. Now remember, we're not completely putting together cards here. All I'm showing you is 2 techniques on how to create a Halloween moon. So we're not going to completely put the cards together, but at the end of the video, I will have examples of the cards I did create using these backgrounds. Now, as I alluded to, when I pulled off that mask, some of the white sticker did stick to it a little bit. And I can't remember, maybe some of the paper did tear a little bit. But as you can see, I was able to easily just add some more color to cover up that background where the white was showing, and really was no harm at all. And then you can see the finished product. You have a very vibrant moon. And if you wanted to add some shadowing or just add a little bit more color around the edges, I just brought out my Fossilized Amber, my distressed crayon, and I added some crayon to the edges where perhaps maybe I didn't completely add my embossing powder. And then I'm using my finger just to kind of add some shadows around it. And if you wanted to add some different colors as well, so perhaps maybe you wanted to add some orange or maybe a little bit of red, you can certainly do that as well. It's completely up to you. But that basically is the technique. And as you can see, you get a real nice, vibrant moon using that distress glaze. And then with those same colors, I'm going to go ahead and add some color to the crackle paste, which is to my left. So again, using some of your yellows, some of your oranges, and you can even use some of your reds to add color to that moon. And remember, for your texture paste, you are going to have some texture to it, obviously. So you're going to have to kind of rub that crayon in to make sure it does get into the nooks and crannies. And then just use your finger to actually move it around. So again, I'm just coming in with my distressed crayons, and I'm going to go ahead and add some color to my moon. And when you move your crayon around, you may need a little bit of moisture. So add your color and then get some moisture to be able to move that color around as well. Now, what I ended up using was my Mod Podge, but you can use collage medium. You could probably even use water, I would imagine, but I like the Mod Podge or the collage medium, which is more of a gluey texture a little bit, and that does move the color around really nicely. And the Mod Podge that I used is the Antique Matte Mod Podge, which I'll link to for you as well, and that has a little bit of a brownish tone to it, so I really like the combination of the colors with the Mod Podge. So as you can see, while we have similar backgrounds, we have 2 distinct type of moons. One of the moon is a little bit more smoother, less textured, And then your other moon, which is what we're working on now, is definitely a little bit more textured and has more craters. So just depending on the look that you want, you have 2 examples of some real vibrant Halloween moons for your Halloween cards. So I hope that you've enjoyed my process today of creating Halloween moons for you. And hopefully you'll walk away with some good techniques for creating Halloween moons for your cards. Now remember, I didn't actually finish off the cards in this video, so make sure that you do stick around to the end so you can see my finished cards using these backgrounds. And as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create these along with the links to the stores. Now some of the next couple of videos that I'm going to be adding are going to be using some of the new Stampers Anonymous Halloween stamps from Tim Holtz. So I was really excited to get those stamps in. So be watching for those in the next few videos. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell so that way you are notified when the next video comes in. And as always, if you've enjoyed my video, I would certainly appreciate a thumbs up. Now remember, this is my Halloween series, and I will be creating Halloween cards through the end of the month, and then I'll go ahead and I'll be drawing some winners from people that have left comments on my videos. So make sure that you do leave me a comment and let me know what moon you preferred the best on these 2. Did you like the ones with the embossing glaze, or did you like the crackle paste? All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.